Hi, I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Okay, folks, why don't we go ahead and get started with the meeting, and we'll start moving on with the agenda. And we expect for the mayor and his chief of staff to arrive momentarily. But in the interim, why don't we go ahead and get started and open up the meeting and go around the room and introduce each other and move on with the agenda. To my right.
Kyle Anderson. I have to change my title now. No more councilman, just civic engager.
All right. Okay.
Bongi Makubane, President of the West End NRZ Civic Association.
Sarah Diamond, Independent Researcher.
Henrietta Beckman, President, Mothers United and Families.
Patricia Flowers, Charlotte Baptist Church, not Foundation. I mean, not board.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I interrupted you.
That's okay.
Joan Gibson, NAACP Executive Committee.
Pat Kelly, President, CEO of Divorce Women.
Mark Jenkins, Greater Hartford Harm Reduction Coalition.
Anthony Griffin, local businessman.
Thomas Blake, Adult Education Center in Hartford.
Danielle Green, Institute for Community Research.
Meg Weeks, Institute for Community Research.
Sam Gray, President and CEO of Boys and Girls Club of Hartford.
Ann Smith, Executive Director of AFCAN.
Christopher Farmer, Hartford Communities That Care.
Got up on me too fast.
Reverend David Hendricks, citizen of the city of Hartford. Executive Director of the Executive Director.
Committee.
Well, Executive Committee of the NAACP.
Muhammad Ansari, President of the Greater Hartford NAACP branch.
Come on, Dorothy.
Darlene Childs Hungry.
No, that's right.
Chair of Northeastern RZ.
Courtney Jackson, Urban League of Greater Hartford.
Kelvin Lovejoy, Student Minister, Mohammed Moms.
Diane Jones, City of Hartford.
Monique.
Monique Biggs, Capital Planning School.
All right. Just some time for introductions. All right. John Thomas, introduce yourself.
Here.
All right. Yeah, Thomas is here. All right. You just caught us doing introductions. So you're up.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Thea Montanez, Chief of Staff to Mayor Luke Bronin.
Good evening, everyone. Luke Bronin, Mayor. Nice to see you.
Okay. All right. And in the far right over there is, and taking some minutes, is Erica Kimber with Hartford Communities That Care and her son and one of our young men. Okay. Thanks again, folks, for joining us here tonight. And we're going to go ahead and move through with the rest of the agenda. And essentially what happened is that, as you recall, February 1st, we were all here. What do you need, sir?
That pen.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay. Thank you.
We were all here providing an update on the status of MBK. Ms. Montanez represented the city of Hartford at that time and shared what some of the vision was on behalf of the city and the mayor. And there were some comments that folks and concerns that were shared at that meeting, but ultimately what we all decided to do was return back here, hopefully with the mayor. In this case, he has arrived on the 29th of this month to start talking about a way that we can potentially make this a win-win, something that we can all mutually agree upon in terms of moving the ball forward. So that's part of the old business of what we committed to doing between then and now. And so where that brings us at today on the agenda is primarily with new business, with the mayor here today, sharing his vision and thoughts around MBK and other ideas he may have, but also for us to share with you the vision or the proposed leadership structure for MBK for your feedback and recommendations. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to the Honorable Mayor Luke Bronin.
Thank you, Andrew. It's great to be with you. Good to see everybody. Should I stand? Does everybody see?
Sure.
So let me stand over here. As you all know, My Brother's Keeper presents an enormous opportunity for the city of Hartford. And just stepping back and thinking about what is it that My Brother's Keeper represents? To me, it's two things. First of all, it's the commitment of President Obama's administration during his time of office to focus on our community, particularly communities just like the north end of Hartford and the northeast neighborhood. It's focusing on issues that are too often ignored, especially the last two pieces. A big part about education, we all know education is a critical component of success here. But the particular focus on how do we make sure that all kids, all young people who are out of school, disengaged in one form or another, have the opportunity to get a job, and that all of our young people are safe from violence. And President Obama's term only lasts another 10 months, but I think what's been clear, and they've sent a lot of signals this way, is that this is exactly where he's going to be focused beyond his administration. I think this is his Clinton initiative. This is his. This is where he's going to try to make his mark beyond being president. I think we have a chance to try to position Hartford to be the model of how we as a city can look not only to embrace the language of that vision, but to really start making some progress on the ground. A lot of you have heard me talk for many months about a couple of areas that are key priorities from my perspective. Youth employment is one, the top one. And conversations with folks like Andrew and others who are doing some of the direct intervention work with young people that made me believe we have a gap in the way we're providing youth employment opportunities right now. City creates, the youth service, the summer youth employment, where more than 1,000 kids get, 5 weeks of summer job, but it's limited. And more important than that, I'm not sure it's reaching the kids who need it most. We need to make sure we're getting to those kids who definition of My Brother's Keeper, who aren't in school, who are disengaged, who may not be submitting those applications, who may not be ready for the internship at the Travelers or the Aetna, but who deserve a chance to work. And so, to me, again, inspired partly by conversations with folks like Andrew and Brother Carl and Ira Nazario and others, we need to be able to make sure that we have something to offer kids that we're trying to get on to a different track. And if you look back at what we did during the Great Depression as a country, it was as simple as deciding we were going to put people directly to work. We were going to pay a paycheck, not a big one, but we were going to pay a paycheck to as many young people as possible to do things that are visible. And, during the Great Depression, it was building bridges and building parks. For us, I think it needs to be things like fixing up blighted property and helping to maintain the trails in our parks, and helping seniors with their snow or with their leaves or put a new coat of paint on their house. To me, that's the kind of program we need to make sure that we are coming together as a community to have a maximum impact. Because if we're really going to achieve the goal of making sure that all kids who are out of school have a job, that's a big goal. That's not going to be solved by one program here or there. That's going to take all of us coming together and trying to raise significant amount of resources, which is something I've been trying to do. I'm out there, shaking the trees, going to private companies, private foundations, trying to build that financial support that we're going to need to be able to fund that. But ultimately, we need to set a goal for ourselves and then hold ourselves accountable for that. We need to set big goals. It needs to be, I think, as a near term, 250 right out of the gate, try to create opportunities for 250 kids, grow that quickly to 500 after demonstrating to the funders that are out there that the model works, with an aspiration of serving 1,000 kids down the road. Those are the kind of numbers we have to impact if we're serious about achieving the goal that's written on the paper of making sure that all kids who are out of school have a job. So I'd be happy to talk a little bit more about the Youth Service Corps, but I just wanted to start there because I think that is a real starting place to think about how we, as a broad coalition, can be most effective in trying to achieve the goal. Each one of your groups, and I think there's room to even expand this coalition. I think there are a lot of tremendous organizations around the table. I'd love to see even more representation from some of our faith institutions, for example. But there's a real opportunity to get together and, in a common purpose, embrace a goal like that, and then make it happen. And when I talk about making it happen, I mean use all of the organizations that are here as for example, as referral points to help identify who is it that we need to target to get into this youth service corps. Who are the 250 kids we most desperately need to get jobs to? You guys know that better than anybody else. And I think that's the real power in a coalition like this. To use an example of how I think a coalition like this can work, and can work very powerfully, take a look at what we've done in homelessness over the past couple of months. It's not all that, may not be all that visible, and we still have a big challenge to overcome on the homelessness front. But in Greater Hartford, chronic homelessness has declined by 40% in the last 10 months. And there has, in all these decades of trying to go after the homelessness problem, there has not been that kind of an impact. And the reason that happened is that there was a coalition built, a broad coalition, everybody coming to the table, and then not just coming to the table and updating one another, but coming to the table and saying, who are you serving? Who do you know that's homeless? Let's get it all out on one piece of paper. Let's get into one database, one place, and then let's literally divide up the responsibility. Let's make sure that there is somebody working with every one of these families, every one of these individuals. And it was that kind of partnership that was in the weeds, that was focused on action and implementation, that was informed by a common picture, common data that was shared by all the organizations that are part of it. That's what allowed them to move the needle there. And to me, that's the real opportunity we have here. We have organizations, every single one of you around the table could name 10 kids who need to have an opportunity to get onto a different path. Every one of you around the table could probably name, somebody who could be a mentor to a group of those kids. If we think of this youth service corps as being broken down into sort of 10-member teams with a mentor or a coach that's working with each one of them, we need those mentors and those coaches to be folks who can get to them, who can reach them, who can inspire them, who can motivate them, who can get them to show up, who can go knocking on their door when they don't show up. And you guys, everyone around this table, can help identify those kinds of individuals. And I really think, coming back to the bigger picture, that if we can make progress in building a structure like that together to go after this goal of youth employment, then we can be a city that the national My Brother Keeper movement will look to as a place they want to make an example. And that will help us to build and to grow what we start to cultivate. So I think there's huge opportunity in this coalition. I've been talking about my commitment to youth employment, and I want to be held accountable for it. I don't want to be stuck in rhetoric. I want to make sure that we are moving the needle in visible ways, in numbers that matter. And so, I look forward to partnering with everybody around this table. I'd love to grow the table more. One of the things we don't want to do at all is disempower our community partners. It's the opposite. We need to empower our community partners to help us achieve a specific goal with specific numbers in mind, with specific young people in mind, and that's what I think will make the difference. To some extent, the same is true on the second goal. It's a bigger one. It's a little harder to get your arms around. All the things that you have to do to protect our city from violence, protect young people from violence. But I do think there are some specific things that we know we need to do. One of them is we need to get serious about being better at reentry. And we need to get serious about being better about being a second chance society. And that is partly by working for legislative changes, but partly comes back to the same things I was just talking about. Getting all of the coalitions, all of the groups that are out there already working on reentry, that are serving some individuals, that some have some resources that they're bringing to bear, getting them all around the table and figuring out, can we actually create a list of all the people we know in this city who are coming back this year? And then can we literally divide up responsibility and make sure that we are delivering the services in the most effective way possible? The last thing I would say, and I say this everywhere I go now because I think it's important to be direct and acknowledge the problems as well as the goals. We have to do all of this in a situation where the city of Hartford is facing a huge budget crisis. And I'm trying to figure out the way to talk about this budget crisis because I think for a lot of folks, they've heard talk of a budget crisis for a long time. It seems like every year there's a budget crisis. But this is different. And the reason it's different is because every year in the past, we've solved it by, it's a little Scotch tape and, some glue and stuck things together. We sold parking garages, we took long-term reserves, things like that, that we've just run out of those tricks. And the problem was pushed further and further down the road, so it got bigger and bigger. So we've got massive budget problems that we've got to solve as a city. And that, to me, is all the more reason why we need to make sure we're taking full advantage of the resources we've got inside City Hall to coordinate across multiple stakeholders and bring all the coalition together, and also make sure that we're doing it as cost effectively as possible and doing as much as possible to raise resources, outside of the city and bring it to bear. And it's also all the more reason why we need to make sure that we're positioning ourselves through accountability, through demonstrating specific results that we can send down to my brother's keeper down in DC to make them embrace us as a place they want to make it an example nationally of. That's what I think our goal ought to be. That's some of our challenge, but that's what I think our goal ought to be. And I'm excited to making this, my brother's keeper, one of the things that that the administration is most intensely focused on. It's also an initiative that I think marries up in a really powerful way with other things that are going on. The Promise Zone, which has a lot of promise, but requires us to seize it, requires us to be really disciplined about how we're seeing that opportunity, what grant applications we're going after, what groups we're bringing together to work on it. Those two things at once, Promise Zone and My Brother's Keeper, the two signature Obama initiatives overlaid right here, that I think is a powerful, powerful combination. And as many of you know, Thea, before I brought her on as Chief of Staff, had been the Promise Zone Director. We're going to be bringing on a Promise Zone Director very soon, who's going to be focused, once again, focused full-time on making sure we're taking full advantage of that. And I think there's huge opportunity in marrying these initiatives up and making sure that they're both priorities. So I'd be happy to take any questions, happy to talk for as long as you want. I may have to run out before all the rest of the meeting, but I'm happy to take questions and have a conversation as long as everybody around the table wants.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're going to go around, entertain questions. Muhammad Ansari and John.
Yeah, Mayor, the question I have is, the things you mentioned, putting young people to work and kids who are out of school needs jobs. And you mentioned the Youth Corps and the Youth Service Corps, and also the violence piece. Mm-hmm. Young people, been a lot of violence. And I've been around, for a long time in Hartford, many years. And Hartford Community Care has been involved in this kind of work for many years. All of the things that you're speaking about, Hartford Community Care started because of the youth violence and stop the violence and getting the young people to work. So it's a very committed organization with a leader that is very committed, and I wouldn't advocate for no person that wasn't sincere and have proven themselves over many years of being totally committed to the people of the city of Hartford. And I just can't see how we can't work with Hartford Community Care as far as kind of heading this up, working with the city, heading this, as opposed to bringing in someone else to try to create what has already been created, and we have someone who is dedicated and committed and has a proven track record, who was involved in this kind of work before The president even came in office and to start talking about my brother's keeper was doing this work. And many of us sitting around this table know that. You know, if we know Andrew and anything about the city of Hartford, we know that this has been being done. So I just can't see why we can't work this out so that Harvard Community Care is in a lead position in this, and not just kind of pushed off to the side, and then we build an organization around other people and other players who probably doesn't have the kind of commitment that he had, because if they did have, they would already be involved in this kind of work already, like he's been, when he wasn't even getting paid. I remember when he was doing this work, just doing it, you know, and finally got a organization started where he's getting a few dollars. He's never really gotten the kind of funding that would enable him to do the kind of work that he really could do if he had the kind of support that he need from city and the state. He's never had the support that he needed to really do the kind of work that he can do. This, from the federal government, gives an organization like, and a person like Andrew the kind of support that he would need to do the work. And I think he would be a very strong person to have, you know, in your administration, part of your effort in heading this up. So that's true. That's where those are my comments about this.
No, I appreciate all those. So let me say a couple of things. First, I know Andrew for a long time and helped make sure that he had support from the state when I was up there. And I think the work that Hartford Community Care, especially the intervention work and the work to make sure that you guys are first in and dealing with families and with kids, right in the wake of violence, and the preventative work and the work to combat retaliation. I mean, that is powerful stuff, and this can't get done without that kind of work. And we need to make sure that we're bringing everybody together. The other thing I'll say is I agree with you. No one could doubt Andrew or Hartford Community Care's commitment. The only thing I would say is I think there are a lot of groups that are deeply committed, and what we need to do is make sure that we're not making any of these efforts about one particular group, but we're trying to get the most out of every group that is focused on this. The other thing I would say is, you mentioned that the President's Initiative, creates the opportunity to direct resources to groups like this. Unfortunately, My Brother's Keeper doesn't provide any resources. It's really just right now, it's just the organizing principle. It's the commitment. It's asking cities to take on these challenges and recognize that they're all related to one another. That the education piece and the youth employment piece and the anti-violence piece, that those things can't be separated from each other. So it's asking cities to commit to recognizing that that's all tied together, and recognizing that you've got to go after all of that, and you've got to bring every stakeholder around who's working on those issues from any angle. Whether it's the Boys and Girls Club, whether it's Community Partners in Action, whether it's Hartford Communities That Care, whether it's the Y, whether it's Compass, any of those groups. And more and more and more, whether it's the churches, whether it's the organizations that right now sponsor youth employment programs, all of those things. It's about trying to bring all of those groups to the table and get all of them to put the most that we can get on the table in the most coordinated way. So I'm not talking about pulling this and giving somebody else the role. I'm talking about doing what most cities that have committed to the My Brother's Keeper initiative have done, which is put the city use the resources that the city already has, in the sense of we have a director of youth and families. We have a police chief for the law enforcement side. We have the school board. We have all of these things that exist. And as mayor, I want to be accountable for helping to make sure we're using all of those tools inside city government to complement and to maximize all that we can get in partnership with all the organizations that are out there. So it's not about disempowering any one group. It's about trying to figure out how we can use what's already there in the city in the most powerful way, and how we can bring as many people as possible together to get the most out of what everybody does together. And I will say, almost all the cities that have committed to the My Brother's Keeper do it that way. There's it's the city hall is the planning agent, right? Because there are a lot of different functions. There are a lot of different parts of making it successful. A part of My Brother's Keeper is the planning component. Just working on the plans and then monitoring. Working with every organization to make sure that we're actually getting that common data picture that I'm talking about. Can we figure out who all of these kids that we need to touch are, and how can we make sure that we are reaching them? That is the function that usually is performed by city halls in other cities that are serious about My Brother's Keeper, because they have the tools to do that, and that allows us, to the extent that we can raise resources for supporting external groups, allows us to focus on the implementation that all of those groups around the table exist to do.
John and Ms. Flowers.
Mayor, I just want to, after listening to the great work that you got going forward here, I just want to comment that, from the beginning of the Promise Zone effort, being working for one of the groups that was in the application and seeing what went in to provide the proof of collaborations and alignment of resources to get the designation, and being the person who wrote the community outreach plan for the Promise Zone in the beginning, it became apparent to me that we had to do exactly what you're talking about, and that's to bring all of the resources together at the table. And I set out to do the organizing of nonprofits and trying to create a model of a prototype of collaborative action on a very small scale so that we could scale it up, called the Action Lab. I've had a few meetings. Andrew is part of this group that's convening, and I've been a part of this My Brother's Keeper effort from when he first invited me to it. So I realized that the most important thing is to get the most out of both of these designations is that we come together and align our resources and pool our efforts to just make the most out of these designations. They don't bring any resources to the table as far as I understand. And but even though when you came into office, my work stream was taken right along with probably Andrew's with MBK, and I don't have the role that I had when before you came into office, and I don't blame that on you. But I've committed myself to the same plan. So like on March 10th, I'm meeting with a group of 8 nonprofits who we had a meeting 2 weeks ago, and we made the goal of creating 100 jobs for 100 people in the Northeast neighborhood in a pilot.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we plan to use that effort to create a set of metrics to measure what the impact that has on public safety and eventually on the health outcomes in the neighborhood. So I think we also benefit from creating metrics, improving our work, and creating an analysis of how that impacts, what impacts are created, which would help us in getting grants and securing resources in the future. So on March 10th and 11th, Andrew's coming. We're going to do this effort, 100 jobs in 100 days. I'm wondering how that aligns with the youth that you said 250. I'm wondering if that would align with the plans that you have with the city, and could, who else could benefit from that work stream?
John, let me just interject for 1 second. You're talking about a specific, we got some folks that want to speak specifically to MBK in the context of this, and I know your question is a bit skewed towards the Action Lab.
No, it's actually the Promise Zone, and if we don't create these conditions, then we can't get the most out of it. This is about aligning our resources. I was done with my question anyway.
But let me just address it, because I think it does get to the bigger issue. Obviously, creating 100 jobs for kids and bringing organizations to do it aligns perfectly, right? It doesn't have to be a part of the same. It could or could not. We could talk about Youth Service Corps, but the goal is to create jobs for kids. Right. And your point about setting metrics that we can take a look and see whether we've been successful, and making sure that everyone is playing by that same playbook. That's what we need to make sure we're doing. And as a city, to the extent that there are either grant administration functions or others where we can try to set those common goals and those common standards and common playbook so that we're all measuring success in the same kind of powerful way. You know, that I think is exactly the kind of thing we need to be doing.
Okay, we really want to get as many folks in here as possible as well. Pat and then Ms. Kelly.
Thank you, Andrew. My question is, Mayor, when I first started reading, about the MBK initiative, when the president first announced it or publicized it, that it was my understanding that there was private funders that were mobilized who were going to support the MBK initiative, and there was a lot of funders that I was familiar with. Not that they gave me money, but I was familiar with them and stuff. So I'm just wondering, are they still there? And how does that align with the city's plan and programs?
They are still there. What they had, so they're still raising the money. They're out raising money. They have a goal for what they're going to raise, and then they're going to deploy that once they've raised it. They haven't yet opened that up for applications, and that's why we're in such a critical period to make sure that we are making ourselves as strong as possible, to be as competitive as possible, to get as much of that as possible. But none of those resources have been made available yet.
Ms. Kelly.
Mayor, thank you for coming out tonight.
Thanks.
And I completely agree with using other folks' money, City Hall in this case, and as many resources that you can provide. Having said that, there's another issue that has not been touched on, and I may be incorrect. I was under the impression that President Obama, being a black man, understood the specific issues surrounding young black boys and men. Through the decades and centuries of institutionalized, calculated racism, our young black men are being hit from a number of different levels of our society. And nobody understands a black man like a black man. Knowing that, I raised 2 girls and 1 boy, completely different. I have a whole unit of black boys where women cannot come in and interrupt that chemistry. I understand as much as I can as a woman what these black boys feel and not even know where it's coming from. I understood you talked about kids need jobs, and they do. But I thought we were talking about the specific plights of African American young men. So as you pull this into the city to be managed properly as the other models, I'm going to ask you, as much as you can being a white man, to understand that there is a specific entity, a specific individual that is targeted by my brother's keeper. It is not girls, black girls, it's not Latino boys, it is young black men. And to generically treat it as youth, we're missing the mark.
That's what I said.
It is specifically geared toward black men. Every day at the barn, every day, I get 2 to 3 black boys to come to say, hey lady, do you have a job? I'll do anything. And I feel so bad, and I've hired a lot of them, but I can't hire a lot because I don't have the money. But I know that if I don't give them something, they're going to get it from someplace.
Hello. Hello.
Okay? And they're forced into that. They're forced into that. So as you develop this system inside of City Hall, you need a black man to help you understand it. Because it is not like any other kind of child. He really isn't. He really isn't. And I would charge you to seriously consider that. Having said that, and my final remark, that one at the end of the table has been in the streets fighting for these young men, understanding what he's coming up against because he's a black man, and understanding what he has to do when his feet hits the street. He has the legacy, he has the commitment, he has the background, he knows what he's doing. As you pull this inside, don't leave him out.
We don't want to leave anybody out. And I couldn't agree with you more. And that's why what we need to do is make sure that the leadership is coming from all of these organizations that are part of this coalition. I'm not trying to take that from anybody. What I want to do is use City Hall to make sure we are complementing what you do and allow you to do it even better with more support and hopefully more coordination, because I think we've got so many groups, we need to make sure there's more coordination. But I take your point 100%. And I will say one other thing. I think we need to make sure that we are allowing our organizations to do what they're strongest at. And to the extent that part of MBK is about putting spreadsheets together and writing plans and managing correspondence with the MBK office down in DC, that's an important function. I'm not sure that is what all the organizations around this table want to be spending their time doing. You want to be out working with the kids who need to be, who need your support, your guidance, and your mentorship, and the mentorship and the work of folks exactly like Andrew who have such a history of doing it. So what I'm trying to do is make sure that we are all playing to our strengths. And there are some things that I don't think City Hall could ever do, and we won't try to do them. And then there are some things that I think may become, to some extent, a distraction or a shift of focus for some organizations that actually do some things better than anybody else could ever do them. And those are the things they need to be focused on.
Darlene Charles and Ms. Bonner. And actually, Ms. Bonner, because I know that you...
Okay. Yeah, so I guess I was going to make a comment that just what the mayor just said. When you talk about the organizing structure and the planning and the grants, it's not necessarily the same person as the one that would be feet to the ground, exactly, which I think a lot of us in this room are about. Exactly. And so when I personally looked at the structure, I saw the administrative components. And I'm not championing for one idea or another, but I just wanted to say, as far as I'm concerned, it's really important for us to separate the actual administration of a program versus service delivery. And when you mix those skills and put the person that should be, feet on the ground into an office, we can really lose a lot. So I agree with everything that's been said, but I'm thinking that when I looked at Andrew's proposal, that's what was really illustrated, making sure that the delivery arm is available to actually be where the need is. So that's what, so I think that the structure, I think we're getting caught up in it's moving to City Hall. Really, that's the administrative arm. I'm speaking from being responsible for an NRZ that's got, I don't know how many kids are coming out of school in June. And we are feeling a sense of urgency that even in the winter, we were getting a lot of mischief. And so I hope that we can actually focus on what are we going to do when those kids come out of school in another 2.5 months, and let the people that are behind the scenes organizing, all of the paperwork. I'll turn it over to Darlene.
I mean, right now, you said everything I wanted to say. You truly did. And Pat, with both of them right now, Mayor, thank you. I feel like all of these kids are my kids. Now, everybody put their mindset. These are our children in the street dying every day because they have nothing to do. We have a sense of urgency. We're sitting around the table talking about the same thing we talked about last month. All we're going to do is keep talking. I'm tired of talking. I want action. We need to get it implemented. We got the plan. Let's get it going. The kids are going to come home. I'm getting emotional because I feel like these are my kids. I don't want to get that phone call in the middle of the night. And I can only imagine. I mean, I'm looking at all my brothers and sisters sitting around the table now. You too. But I'm just saying, just because they have nothing to do, Andrew is very dedicated. Pat is dedicated. We have so many dedicated people around this table that's doing what they can to get these kids working or get them busy, but we keep kicking the can down the street. We gotta do something now. We can't keep doing the planning. It's over. Let's get it going. School, like you said, school is out in 2 months and we're still sitting around the table.
That's right. Well, look, I mean, I couldn't have said it better than Bongi as far as the bigger
Exactly.
question. I think,
Yeah.
you know, I should have just let you say it. But that's exactly right, you know, and as far as just moving, that's what we're trying to do. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. You know, I wanted to have this conversation because I know this was a conversation that was important to this group to have.
It's very
And so
important.
I've come anytime anybody wants to have a conversation with me about it, but I couldn't agree with you more. I think this is about making sure that we're implementing. So I'll tell you, and where I'm spending my time on this, two things I'm spending my time on right now with respect to this. One is trying to raise the resources, because without that, none of this happens. Right? So I'm trying to raise the resources. We've made some good progress, but there's still a ways to go. And the second, as we're doing that, is to just to help develop a structure that we can very quickly make sure we get everybody involved in and shift into implementation. So that's what we're focused on. We have a huge sense of urgency. I mean, there is nothing Thea can tell you, there is nothing that we are focused on more intensely than especially the youth service corps piece of this, which I think is those goals 5 and 6, those two goals of youth employment and keeping kids safe from violence, those could not be more tightly bound together. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay, Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for coming tonight. Just wanted to kind of ask you a couple, maybe 2 questions. Some of it you kind of touched upon already, but one was, in my particular mind, you talked about structure. I'm looking at maybe talk to us about a timeline, about when you implement certain things, and then you talked about also the Promise Zone director. You haven't selected one yet. And my question to you in relationship to that is, will the Promise Zone director be also the keeper of my brother's keeper? Will that have any kind of coalition? Because I know you're trying to bring them both together with the Job Service Corps. And then also, she made a great point about the administrative function. Right. It looks like there's several kind of hats going on here. Looking at the structure piece, I know Andrew has submitted this. Where are you in structure specifically? Can you give us that? And then a timeline of implementation so we can find out exactly, because everybody's here is wondering the same thing. We had a discussion, we know it's being brought in-house, which is fine. I always fought against that, but I'm not there, so. but it's gonna be there. And I know the folks here are definitely committed and willing to make the sacrifice if we get the direction from you.
Yeah. So that distinction that Bongi made is exactly what we're talking about. It's the administrative function that's the city hall. That's all, and that's all that we want to do because we don't want to supplant or push out any other organization. So it's the administrative function. With respect to the timeline, let me step back. About the Promise Zone director.
Yeah.
We have asked. The Promise Zone director used to be housed in the United Way, right? And we've had conversations with them. We're going to bring that position in-house for a slightly different reason, which is that's a position that existed, was a full-time position dedicated to that. But if we're going to be serious about accountability, I don't want that person sitting over the United Way. I want that person sitting where they're working every single day with all of our departments that are supposed to be working together and helping make sure that coordination happens. I think that person can be so much more effective sitting at that nexus of all those departments and organizations inside City Hall than sitting outside. So we've asked the council to shift some of those funds from one account to another. They're looking at it. I know it's going to committee soon, but I'm hopeful that by mid-March we will have, is that right, guys? Council President Clark is here, is it? So I think by mid-March, we're hopeful that structure will be in place that we can bring that position in. I don't think that we will formally designate that person as my Promise Zone and My Brother's Keeper, but by virtue of the fact that they cover the same territory and are focused on a lot of the same work, then obviously they're going to be very tightly bound, and as it should be, because you wouldn't want those things to be separated. Otherwise, you'd lose a lot of power.
And
in terms of the timeline of youth, so in terms of the timeline of getting the Promise Zone position, I hope it's mid-March. In terms of the timeline of launching the Youth Service Corps. Our goal is to launch this summer when school goes out.
Okay,
So we're playing hard against the clock. We've got to raise those resources. But when you go out to raise resources, there are a couple of challenges. One, people want to know whether other people have given. So we're getting that first group to commit, and then we're using that to leverage other people to support as well. The other thing is they want to see the clear plan, and we're submitting for a few different grant applications in the next week or so that will require that to be more clearly on paper, and be glad to share that with you.
Do you know, just as a quick, do you know the amount currently what the war chest has for MBK? Because it was at a 500 million before, but did you have?
It was never at 500 million. 500 million was the goal that they set to raise. So I don't know what they have in the pot right now.
Okay.
But they didn't start out with any money
It was zero.
at all. It was zero.
zero.
It was a goal that they wanted to raise towards.
Okay, now, before, I know that you're running short on time, there's a document that folks wanted me to pull together as well, and you'll notice there's two things that, in terms of the proposed structure, that we wanted to get some feedback from you on. But I know when we talk about in the context of funding, there is a document here that talks about potential funding sources for MBK partners in the city of Hartford. And mainly, this document actually is pulled out of the House and Senate spending bill that was passed in December of last year and signed by Obama. And you can see here that there's approximately $2.7 billion of funding for a variety of different initiatives or opportunities that folks, whether you're MBK involved or you're running an organization, you're doing work specific to youth and families, can actually, my point is that we really need to take a look at those application deadlines. Because even as we're continuing to plan, even though we're continuing to contemplate what next steps are going to be, these timelines or these deadlines are ticking away, and our communities are losing precious moments to apply for these opportunities. So when we talk about leveraging promise zones and those points, well, these are clearly funding opportunities that we need to start putting our heads around in terms of pursuing. Rather, regardless of where MBK stands or where it's going to end at towards the end of this year, again, as coalition partners and member organizations, I encourage you to take a look at what funding is available so that we can start targeting those resources. We clearly know, as the mayor pointed out, the state of Connecticut is about as dry and broke as you can imagine. And the city of Hartford is in no more better position to many. And so again, if the federal dollars and the opportunities for philanthropic support is available, the philanthropic support's going to be there, whatever's there, and so forth. Their timeline isn't as stringent as our federal partners are. But in terms of these federal dollars that are available, we really need, and I encourage the mayor, the council, and each of you to really start taking a look at what's out there and not let this be an opportunity to let this stuff go by while we're continuing to contemplate what our next steps is going to be. So I just want to put that out there. The second thing is that we definitely want you to take a look at what's been proposed based on our last meeting, and that's that document here that you got the schematic on. And essentially what it speaks to is that the mayor being the lead, obviously elected official, accountable for MBK. There's never been a dispute about that. That is certainly the way that it is. He's the chief elected official accountable for MBK. We were proposing, and we mutually agreed, that an MBK director that works for the city of Hartford should be lead this effort, etc. But also, as you know, when you go to NRZ meetings and other coalition meetings and so forth, you have liaisons from the city of Hartford that come to those meetings, and perhaps those liaisons can be a part of MBK Pacific to Youth Violence that we're working on, MBK liaison from the city working with workforce and development, the stuff that Capital Workforce Partners does, and certainly a liaison that can work with around the academic goals 1 through 4. And then obviously with those 3 different areas there, what you see here on this schematic is what our particular roles will be, especially as it relates to this particular coalition and what we believe would be a practical approach to keeping everyone as whole as possible. And again, this is just a proposal that you've instructed us to pull together. Myself again and Thea Montanez met. We both agreed this is something that we need your feedback on as well. And so either you can, weigh in on some of this in terms of your impressions or certainly in the next several days or so, continue to communicate what you believe might be the best approach to make this a win-win on behalf of our communities. And so I wanted to make sure, again, that that information got out to you and you understood it. Anthony?
Mayor Luke, thank you for coming. We can have a resource like the Hartford Regional Market and have all the talented young men that Ms. Kelly talked about, and yet we don't have one fruit stand operating in the city of Hartford or in our neighborhoods.
It's a great question. I mean, so let me throw it back at you. Why don't we? I mean, why don't we? We've got community gardens. We've got community gardens, you know, not far from here. We've got farmers markets that come in. But why not? Why not use those community gardens and set that up exactly? This is a perfect example of what I would say is that not everything should be top down. And that's a great example of something that I think probably ought to be bottom up. And I'd love to help try to make something like that happen.
There is a farmer's market that comes to
Lovejoy.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So Kyle was talking about the farmer's market that comes to Coventry Street. I mean, I guess I would say, in fairness, there are farmers market, there are fruit stands, but they're not necessarily locally run. Or, you know, they are farmers who are coming and bringing their wares and they're selling in the city of Hartford. But you're talking about something that gets Hartford kids involved,
operating on each
and
and every block.
Right, and I would say, you know, there's got to be some opportunities to partner between either some of the community gardens, Knox Foundation, some of the organizations that run those farmers markets. I'm forgetting the name of the organization that coordinates most of them. Hartford Food System. Thank you. You know, that's a great conversation. You know, bring Hartford Food System in here for a meeting and talk to them about how they are ready to partner.
Okay, Brother Lovejoy.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, thank you for coming out. Just a couple of things. So, just very interesting that the president, our first black president, would take this particular initiative to focus on black and Latino boys. We love that, and we know it's going to continue and be a large part of his legacy. For the last 18 years, Andrew Woods and definitely myself actually have been working, all right, in an MBK capacity and working to meet the goals of reducing violence, strengthening academics, and connecting community to what it is that we want our boys to be able to produce for us in the future. A very unique organization, a very unique initiative. I think that as we continue to move forward, definitely it is imperative that yes, we work with boots on the ground, but besides that, we've also been in the policy-making business as well. We want to make sure that while we're out there, you know, with boots on the ground, that we're also able to have that aspect of developing policy that speaks to our young black and Latino boys. There's a certain mindset and a certain spirit, a certain consciousness that we want to make sure that is there and it represents us. Them having jobs is a good thing, but a paycheck alone won't do it. We want to make sure that we're raising consciousness and capital at the same time.
Any other thoughts or comments? Okay. All right, so again, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure how much time you'll be able to stick around on this, but certainly, folks, we do want to, I have actually a report that's due back to the city tomorrow. March 1st is our mid-year report for the My Brother's Keeper contract that we had. At which point, when we get that application in the hands of the city, Thea Montanez and their staff is going to be reviewing that and then taking a look at exactly what else is remaining in terms of our contractual obligations, next steps, etc., and so forth. We do clearly have other work that does need to be done that's inside that plan, and the work groups around evaluation work group as well as program work groups are ready and poised to start making sure we finish this application off that goes back to the city and so forth. And so we're going to do everything we can to make sure we get our information back to the city so that they can in turn get back to us as quick as possible so we can in turn get back to you. Because again, it's imperative that we do not continue or we do not lose precious time getting this ball moving down the line. But There will be a survey that we have have just also developed, which is a survey that asks you as coalition members exactly what this experience has been like, exactly what you think this coalition can do better. We've heard ideas about expanding the coalition. We've heard ideas about other people not at the table. We've heard ideas about there not being all the complete skill sets, perhaps. And so that's something we need to hear from you on. This has not been a perfect process. No process is. This is coalition work. There's dirty work, etc., just like any other community organizing effort, etc. But the bottom line is that each and every one of you at this table have been doing significant work. I know you heard a lot about my name here tonight in communities that care. But there's a lot of folks in this room and inside this city that's been doing some tremendous work as well. This is not about one organization. It's specifically about boys and young men of color and making sure they get the opportunities that they deserve so they don't continue to find themselves in the position that they oftentimes find themselves in. And so let's keep that front and center. I appreciate fully your support for this organization and the admiration of the work that we've been providing. But let there be no, misperception. This is certainly about our kids and families. Ms. Holloway.
I would like to say, hello, everybody.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello. Back in the days, the city used to have jobs for our children in Aetna, Travers. So you need to get back to that to find out where can our kids go, to get a job there, and what can they do? Because I got 2 of them here, especially one of them. She went all the way until she went into the service after high school. So this is what it used to be. So why can't we get back to that? They don't have to go out on the streets to get a job. Get jobs in big places. But you gotta work. There ain't nobody gonna give you something if you don't know how to work to get it. So I'm through. Oh, I said one more thing. I got one more child. I got one more child on my aggravate y'all for a job for. And I'm gonna be on you.
Thank you, Mayor, for coming, and thank all the rest of the stakeholders that's here at the table. One of the things that we are missing is the mere fact that not just our children in school, we need to help our children in school by adding more programs for them so that they can have somewhere where they're being taught, where they're being educated more than just in the classroom, to what's going on in society, what's going on in their world. Then we have to look at and dissect our young men that's out there that's doing crime, violence, and whatnot. What is their purpose? How is they living in their homes that they're not getting this kind of attention or no one's talking to them? We see a young man on the street, walking down the street with his pants half down. Do anybody say anything to him? Maybe a few. But my point is, this is what the stigma is that's going on in the community. So now he's tagged as a thug. Not as a human being or not as a black man, but as a thug. And that carries him where he goes to get a job. He can't get a job. The door is closed in his face. And then not only that, he's looking to support his family because he's out there making babies or whatever the case may be, and he's got to support his family. So now he's looking for ways to do that. And that may be knocking somebody upside the head. So we have to look at that whole picture to be able to reach those young men that's standing out on the corner, that have no job, and find out the reason why. And if we can, provide some kind of services for them. So the programs has to come. In other words, the horse pulls the wagon. We don't need the wagon going before the horse. So we need to look at areas where our kids, our young men are being affected and being left out, per se. So, we have some good young men in this community that want to do the right things, but not given the opportunity. So keep that in mind.
Brother Kyle?
there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But when you look at the street, it changes every day. And if you're not in it, you're not on top of it. If you're gonna make a difference in young people's lives, you have to be in the street, engaging with them. And if you're not engaging with them, then you can't connect with them.
It looks like we got a little bit of time left to actually process some of this information. We're going to draw the meeting to a close. I do want to connect with some of you after the meeting, but I encourage you to take a look at the schematic that's been or proposed structure and give us some feedback on that either by email or certainly in time for the next meeting. And then by the time we get to our next meeting, we'll have had further discussions with the City of Hartford in terms of how we're going to move this particular ball forward. But at the same time, definitely look out for those grant applications and opportunities, folks, because they're out there and we need to be applying for them on behalf of our kids. So take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Next meeting.
April 4th. All right, thank you, folks.
Take care.